This video is a summary of all the different ways you can solve a quadratic equation on your calculator. So the first way to solve a quadratic equation is one we've already talked about. Here you can see I was working on an ice table problem and I was multiplying, cross-multiplying, and I reached this equation with an x squared in it. And I wrote it in the generic form. We say that a is the coefficient in front of the x squared. So our a is going to be equal to 1. B is what we call the coefficient in front of the x. So b is going to be equal to 6.7 times 10 to the negative 7th. And then c is the coefficient that doesn't have an x after it. So c is going to be equal to 5.74 times 10 to the negative 8th. Okay. So for many of you folks, if you have a calculator that looks like mine, you can use an app in the apps menu called PolySimult. So here under the apps button, we can go into applications, we can scroll all the way down to P, or we can hit alpha P to skip down to the P section. We can click on PolySimult and hit enter. We want to use the first option, which is the PolyRoot finder. And the degree of our polynomial is 2 because x squared is our highest polynomial. And then here, A2, A1, and A0, those correspond to A, B, and C. So our A was equal to 1, our B was equal to 6.7 e to the negative 7th, and our C value was equal to 5.74 e to the negative 8th. So we write those three numbers in, we hit the button underneath solve. Ooh, and we get three non-real numbers. Oh, that's because I've forgotten the negative sign. C is negative 5.74. So if we need to go back, we hit the number under coefficients. We can go back and insert a negative sign. Try solving again. There we go. So we've got method 1. Is the PolyRoot finder, which you find under apps in your calculator, and we got x equals 2.39 or x equals negative 2.39. And don't forget to scroll. See the dot, dot, dot at the end? That means there's more number. You need to see the exponent, 10 to the negative 4th, and 10 to the negative 4th. Very important. Okay, so our first method is to use the app. But not all of you have the app on your calculator. Some of it you have had it cleared by teachers in the past. So the other faster way to solve the quadratic equation is to store these numbers as variables in your calculator so you don't have to keep typing them in. So here's how you store a variable. You're going to type in the number you want to store. So I want my A to be equal to 1. So I'm going to type 1. Then I'm going to click this button down here above the on button that says STO. That stands for store. And then I'm going to choose a letter on the calculator I want to save it as. So you can see that the alphabet letters are written in green. So I hit the green button and then I click the letter I want. So I'm going to store the number 1 as A and I hit enter. And so now if I type A and I hit enter, it says that A is equal to 1. So I don't have to type it in anymore. So let's do the same for B, 6.7 e to the negative 7, and we'll store that as B. And then our C value, 5.74 to the negative 8th, oops, negative 8, and we'll store that as C. Okay, so we can double check. There's A, there's B, and there's C. Those are all the correct numbers that we typed in. So now, when we want to solve the quadratic equation, because we've saved these numbers as the letters A, B, and C, all we have to do is type in this equation with the letters to solve. So, quadratic formula, option 1 is the opposite of B plus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. And we want to double close the parenthesis, once for the square root and once for the numerator. The denominator is 2 times a. So there's the whole formula, opposite of b plus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Ooh, non-real answer. Did I remember to store the negative sign? Let's see. Oh, I forgot to store the negative sign again. Okay, so if you want to save over a number, it's the same as before. You just type in a new number and you hit store as C. And now C contains my new number. One of these days I'll learn. So we'll try it again. Parenthesis, opposite of B plus the square root of B squared minus 4AC. Double close the parenthesis, divided by parenthesis 2A. There we go. So method 2, that is store as variables, keep you from typing it in over and over, possibly incorrectly. So our x is 2.39 10 to the negative 4. We can see that gave us the same number. And remember, for every quadratic equation, there are 2 possible answers. Quadratic equation has a plus or minus in it, so we can go in and do it again. But I don't want to have to type this equation in again, so I'm going to use this button over the enter button that says entry. So it's written in blue, so I'm going to hit second entry to repeat that entire equation again, so I don't have to type it in again. And then I'm just going to go back and change that plus sign to a minus sign, and we get the negative answer. Okay, so that wasn't too bad. And then, of course, the third method is to solve it all the way through. And I would highly recommend not doing that, because that's the long way. But just to prove exactly how long that is, I'm going to do it both ways. I'm going to type it out the long way and see how long it takes. All right, so we have the opposite of b plus the square root of b squared uh-oh. Right again. Opposite of b squared, 6.7 e to the negative 7th squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 5.74 10 to the negative 8th. We got to close that parenthesis and close the 1 from the square root and close the 1 from the numerator, divided by 2 times a. Is that everything? Opposite of b plus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2 times a. There we are. 2.39 10 to the negative 4th. And so that you don't have to type in the whole thing again, we'll use second entry. And we will go back and change this to a negative sign, negative 2.39 10 to the negative 4th. Okay, so those are our 3 methods. The fastest one is to use the app on your calculator, PolyRoot Finder. The second fastest one, if you don't have the program, is to store each of the numbers as variables. And the third fastest is the long way, which can take you up to 10 minutes to type in. I hope this has been a helpful tutorial on how to solve quadratic equations as quickly as you possibly can for ice table use.